Two totally unrelated headlines. One about something life or death, something monumental, and one about something political and probably ethereal. But both of these headlines, almost impossible to imagine even a few months ago. Here's the first one, the monumental one. Last convoy of American troops leaves Iraq. The Iraq war now officially 100% over after nearly 9 years of war started for weapons of mass destruction that were not there. Here's the other headline. Ron Paul takes the lead in Iowa. Welcome to news from the Department of Impossible. These two headlines coinciding is simply that, a coincidence. But it is a striking coincidence because Ron Paul, the new frontrunner in Iowa, is the only candidate in the Republican presidential field who is not a George W. Bush foreign policy inheritor. Ron Paul is the only one who doesn't want the Iraq war, say, to go on for longer. And Ron Paul is officially leading the pack in the first Republican nominating state as of the day that the Iraq war officially ends. Now, if you think that might mean that Republican candidates are finally competing to put into practice their party's long popular rhetoric about living within our means and a humble foreign policy and the limited reach of government, that would not be the case. Here with the previous Iowa Republican frontrunner, Newt Gingrich, to disabuse us of that notion.
One of the things you say is that if you don't like what a court has done, that Congress should subpoena the judge and bring him before Congress and hold a congressional hearing. Some people say that's unconstitutional, but I'll let that go for a minute. I just want to ask you from a practical standpoint, how would you enforce that? Would you send the Capitol Police down to arrest him?
If you had to. Or you'd instruct the Justice Department to send a U.S. Marshal.
If you like that whole limited government idea of divided power, co-equal branches of government, Newt Gingrich has a new idea that we should instead be a country where one branch of government has judges arrested if that judge rules in a way that the other branch doesn't like. That said, Mr. Checks and Balances there does find himself fading in the polls now. After a full month of Newt-mentum, after jumping out to a huge national lead over Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich has officially fallen back down to earth. And some of his fading numbers are now, sort of for the first time of all the non-Romney contenders, for the first time, some of his falling numbers are redounding to Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is now polling at 28% in this new national poll released by CNN. That is rarefied air for Mitt Romney. That is air that he has only dreamed of breathing this year. He is on the rise. There is, of course, not a national race for the Republican nomination, though. We don't vote nationally. We vote in order. And first, we vote in Iowa. And what's happened in Iowa is that Newt Gingrich has fallen by 8 points in the latest PPP survey. He has dropped 8 points in Iowa in the span of a week. Ron Paul is now leading the pack there. Is that because of Ron Paul's isolationist foreign policy, his position on things like Iraq or Iran? Who knows? I mean, Ron Paul is now the 6th frontrunner in Iowa this year. 6th! And it can't be that they've just been waiting for an isolationist to come along. I mean, they've picked in turn Mitt Romney and Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann and Newt Gingrich and Herman Cain and now Ron Paul. Iowa Republicans do not seem to want any one particular thing. They seem to want everything in turn. But to the extent that this race is about the whole country learning what the Republican Party is like right now and what Republican politics are like right now, it is worth noting at this juncture that it is, in fact, possible to be the front runner in Iowa if you are an isolationist. It is possible to be the front runner in Iowa without winning the Murdoch primary, without getting Fox News on your side. To spend a little time trawling through Fox News Channel transcripts on LexisNexis searching for the words Ron Paul is to understand very quickly what it means in 2011 to lose the Fox News Channel Murdoch primary.
I think right now anybody other than Ron Paul could beat Obama if the election were tomorrow.
Ron Paul, to me, is just a complete distraction.
Look, there is no foreign policy. There's no commander-in-chief because his notion of foreign policy is impossible.
He will single-handedly be responsible for the re-election of Obama, which you would think is the very thing that he doesn't want.
I absolutely, positively guarantee you that if Ron Paul is the Republican nominee, Barack Obama is the next president.
Right. He's not going to be the nominee.
If Ron Paul wins here, what then?
Well, the Ron Paul people are not going to like my saying this, but to a certain degree it will discredit the Iowa caucuses.
Fox News Channel decidedly not on the Ron Paul bandwagon. You know, for a while when Mitt Romney was really losing the Fox News Channel Murdoch primary, you could tell Mitt Romney was losing that because he just wasn't showing up on Fox News anywhere. But now, if it's a day of the week that ends with Y, Mitt Romney is probably somewhere on the Fox News Channel. And if it is a day of the week that ends with Y and Fox News Channel is talking smack about a particular Republican candidate, the candidate they are likely talking smack about is Ron Paul. And mostly what they are talking smack about is Ron Paul's isolationism on foreign policy. Literally every other Republican candidate, for all of their diversity, for all the different things that each of them prioritizes, for all of their different policy positions and outlooks, all of them, except for Ron Paul, have indicated they would like to start a war with Iran. Please, the sooner the better. And all of them have, to a greater or lesser extent, criticized the fact that the Iraq war is ending. The only problem with that war is that it hasn't gone on long enough. Ron Paul stands alone on those issues, and he gets pilloried for it by the establishment Republicans and by the establishment Republican media. But the idea of not getting involved in another war in Iran, for instance, is something that does get Ron Paul applause from Republican audiences at Republican debates.
You know what I really fear about what's happening here? It's another Iraq coming. There's war propaganda going on. And we're arguing, to me, the greatest danger is that we will have a president that will overreact. Nuclear weapons are loaded over there. Pakistan and India, Israel has 300 of them. We have our ships there. We got to get it in a proper context. Right. We don't need another war.
Understood. And you make that point quite a lot.
You make that point quite a lot. Now, please stop making it. It is likely that whoever wins Iowa, it really will not matter all that much. I mean, it could be Ron Paul. It could be Michelle Bachmann. It could be anyone other than Rick Santorum, really. I mean, it could be Mike Huckabee, right? It was Mike Huckabee in 2008. The uncomfortable truth about the carpet-bombing coverage of the Iowa Republican caucuses is that Iowa itself doesn't much matter when it comes to the process of picking the Republican nominee for president anymore. It is not predictive of what Republicans in the rest of the country are going to do when it's their turn to vote. Winning Iowa mostly just means you are popular in Iowa. Good for you. But the persistent popularity of Ron Paul, both in Iowa and elsewhere, his sustained fundraising, his sustained support, his sustained ability to turn out big crowds, his appeal across the country, his cross-demographic appeal, where he can get people without gray hair to turn out to Republican candidate events. No offense to people with gray hair. I have some myself. What is most interesting about Ron Paul is not just his isolationism. There's always been a strain of that in Republican politics. Pat Buchanan ran as an isolationist, among other things, when he ran back in the 90s. What's most interesting about Ron Paul is the extent to which his domestic stuff, his social issue libertarianism, his position on things like not just the war in Iraq, but the war on drugs, calls out a really uncomfortable truth in modern Republican politics, which is that Republicans want their brand to be small, hands-off government. But the policies they support are more like big, intrusive government. Things like forced mandatory drug testing by the government and federal regulation of every marriage in every state in the country and rounding up and arresting federal judges, I guess now, and the government putting people in jail for smoking marijuana. Ron Paul is for the decriminalization of drugs, which is a coherent position for a small government conservative. Personal responsibility, liberty. That's what Republicans say they are for. But to be Ron Paul in this instance, in this year, in this set of politics, to be Ron Paul in this Republican Party means that in this next clip from this weekend, you are not with Republican Congressman Paul Ryan or conservative columnist George Will. In this next clip, you, small government conservative, you are with Barney Frank.
Can I get an answer on marijuana, George? Are you with me on marijuana? I mean, in personal liberty, if someone wants to smoke marijuana who's an adult, why do you want to make them go to jail?
As you know, with regard to marijuana, I need to know more about whether it's a gateway drug to other drugs. I need to know how you're going to regulate it, whether you're going to advertise it. I am
that's
open
a
to the
cop-out.
Well,
it's been around for a long time. You say a gateway. Anything is a gateway to anything. And let's put it this way. That's the slippery slope argument, which is a very anti-libertarian argument. The fact that if somebody is doing something that's not in itself wrong, that it might lead later on to something else, then stop to something else. No. Don't lock them up for smoking marijuana.
Well, I like what you're calling a cop-out is I'm calling a quest for information. Now,
how long is it going to last, George? We've been doing this for decades.
I understand liberalism's aversion to information because it often doesn't go in their direction.
No, I'm not averse to it. I've been studying this for a long time. You're on Medicare. I mean, how much longer are we going to have to wait for you to make up your mind?
I wanted to get get back to the issue of social mobility, because I think it is the
Good. Let's get off marijuana and onto this.
It's a great embarrassment for the conservatives that they want to tell people
all right,
who
come
they
on,
can have
let's
sex
get on
with.
with it.
Come on, no, Paul, this is big government. Who can I have sex with? Who can I marry? What can I read? What can I smoke? You guys, on the whole, not all of you, but it's the conservatives are the ones who intrude on personal liberty there.
All right, Christiane.
Taking that into account.
Please stop talking about these issues. Who knows? Maybe we will start to see a Barney Frank, Ron Paul wing of the Republican Party emerge. I wonder how that would do in South Carolina. Joining us now is Dave Weigel, political reporter for Slate.com and an MSNBC contributor. Dave, thanks for being here. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks. Good to see you.
You have followed Ron Paul and his relationship with the Republican Party for a long time before these primaries.
Since the beginning of 2007, really.
Yeah, and that was, and some of your, part of the reason that I started paying a lot of attention to you as a reporter is because I thought you were trenchant and insightful and not dismissive about Ron Paul in a way that really resonated with me. Do you think that he is more acceptable to the Republican establishment now than he used to be, or is he still in the same relationship with them that he's always been in?
Well, he talked in 2007 about building up the Republican Party, adding more people to it. I think he actually succeeded in part in bringing people who might have been up for grabs. I talked to Ron Paul voters in 2007 who liked Barack Obama and liked Ron Paul. I actually was one of those voters. And once they were disappointed by what Barack Obama did in office, they remained in his camp. I mean, if you talk to these young people at rallies, you'll hear a lot. The first things they'll list off, the reasons they go for him, are the social issues. And then they'll list the economic crisis issues. They come over to his side the way that they could as easily be convinced by Ayn Rand as they could be convinced by Noam Chomsky. You're at that age where you're receptive to ideas like that. He's added those people to the party, and I think also because the economy collapsed in 2008, because he'd been predicting it for so long, it doesn't really matter that he was wrong in previous instances. If those preachers who predict the rapture are ever right, we're going to forget they got it wrong 20 times. Right. That happened to him. And I think people in the Republican Party who disagree with him on a lot of issues became more sympathetic to him. And this coalition in Iowa is that partly those new voters and partly old-line conservatives who would have listened to him before, but he was right about something.
It's a little bit, I feel, underappreciated in terms of the Iowa dynamic, though, that he has been running a really, really strong anti-abortion campaign in Iowa. He's essentially campaigning as Ron Paul obstetrician in Iowa when you look at his ads.
4,000 babies.
Yeah, and do you think that's driving some of his more traditional support, or how does that interact with the support that he's driven from younger voters and the people who are motivated in the way you were just describing?
It is. They look past it because when voters fall for a candidate, they look past a lot of things. I mean, Herman Cain supporters until the very end looked past a lot of things about Herman Cain. And so the people who are very social libertarian are mostly forgiven him because when will they ever get a chance like this again to vote for a guy who promises to end the Fed, et cetera? In Iowa, definitely, the way he's put this current coalition together is by campaigning very heavily on the life issue. It's a very sensitive ad where he talks to the camera for a minute about seeing a baby be thrown to a trash can or a fetus be thrown to a trash can. And he's gotten kind of away with that because no one really wants to attack him. Some of the Iowa social kingmakers like Bob Vander Plaats have started to point out that, look, he says these things, he believes these things, but as a federalist who doesn't want to impose this on every single state, and as somebody who, he looks at gays in the military, says it's not any of my concern, we can't trust him to actually do this stuff. Yeah. We don't want somebody who just believes it, we want somebody who will enforce it.
Who will impose it through big government,
or that,
which he doesn't believe in.
Who will go after these judges, et cetera. And he's gotten away with it so far, but this is 2 weeks before the caucus, but people don't take him seriously. We'll see if that lasts.
Do you think that the combination of that sort of two-pronged appeal that you're describing and what's needed to win in Iowa, which everybody says is organization, does he have that other side of it? Do you think that he actually could end up winning?
The organizational side, he's always had that. He was only about 100 votes short of Michelle Bachmann in the Ames straw poll.
That's right, yeah.
And actually, they've talked about this since then. No one wanted to interview Ron Paul after he came in second to Michelle Bachmann. Look, he got 10,000 votes roundabout in the caucuses in 2008. He got nearly 5,000 votes in that straw poll. And typically you do about at least 6 or 7 times better. He actually has the numbers to put this together, and that's why I think that is important. The factor that Mitt Romney would not mind if this is the guy who ends up being the next anti-Romney. It's very cynical, but that can help him. No, he's got an organization the Republican Party did not see coming. I think you put very well in the first segment.
And Romney's not going to spend $3 million destroying him the way that he has with Gingrich.
It's like see Gore Vidal and The Best Man. Sometimes you like to have somebody else take care of the mess and you can move in later.